lot of people are wondering, should the Raiders consider trading back from the first overall pick if somebody comes up and wants Fernando Mendoza? Is it worth it? And just to simplify this, let's not present this as if somebody offers a ridiculous you can't say no situation, because I think that's a stupid way of putting it. If somebody starts reaching out to you, if it's the Jets, if it's the Browns, and you're the Raiders, and they start that conversation, do you entertain it or do you shut it down?
You entertain it. I think that it is. I think it's stupid. I was going to use an easier word, or like a nicer word, but I think it's stupid not to take the phone call, right? Like, that doesn't mean that you don't end up taking Fernando Mendoza. That doesn't mean that he's not your guy. But I really think that if you are too self-absorbed to understand and to listen to every single possibility out there, I think that you're missing the boat of just making a good decision. And that's like a life lesson to a degree. Like, I want as much information as possible before making a big decision like that, especially when you're investing a lot of money, a lot of capital, but then also you are hitching your wagon to a franchise quarterback for the next several years, if depending on how long it works out, or if it works out in general. So the Raiders need to listen to everything. Like, there should be no phone call that the Raiders don't take, right? Because again, that doesn't mean that you have to be obligated to something. That doesn't mean that you have to end up doing something. But I really do think that you take every single phone call. It's a fascinating conversation, Joe, because you know the biggest question mark that we don't know? This is the biggest one. Do the Raiders like Fernando Mendoza as a player? We have no idea of that right now. And maybe we'll get a better understanding for it. That is ultimately going to be the decider of if you are open to moving back or not, though. We can make it as easy as you don't have a franchise quarterback. Fernando Mendoza might be a franchise quarterback, so you always take that swing, which I am sympathetic to that perspective. But until we know behind the scenes how much the Raiders like Fernando Mendoza, if they're sold on Fernando Mendoza, if he's a guy that Coach Kubiak, the new head coach, obviously, of the Raiders, likes, that is where this conversation needs to get a little bit deeper. But I think it's stupid. I think it's malpractice for any team not to take every single phone call and to know every possibility that is out there before making a critical decision.
Okay, so to slightly reframe it, I think most teams would be smart enough to at least have the conversation and to hear out what somebody's willing to offer. As I led in this segment, you don't know if somebody is going to completely mortgage their future to get into that position to select Mendoza. This isn't a Bryce Young situation where the Bears had Fields and they needed to pick between the two. Yeah. You could take as many phone calls as you want. I think it would be a gigantic mistake to move off of the pick. Take the calls. Okay. Absolutely take the calls, but you don't have another option. There are not really any free agent options that you can go and test things out and
Derek Carr reunion, man. Derek Carr is back. Derek Carr is back, happening. Joe. He's back.
There are not very many options, though, with Malik Willis or like Mac Jones that you can go out there and go and get that you could test to see and then turn to the 2027 draft. We also spent the offseason talking about how this quarterback draft could have a lot of options, and a lot of those guys went back to school. So as much as 2027 looks enticing, I think it would be naive to assume that all those guys end up taking the leaps that we're hoping for. We'll talk about that stuff in the summer. But, Ryan, at the end of the day, you have been a franchise that has just been abysmal at quarterback. Even when Derek Carr was there, I really don't think that, like, Derek Carr, if you have to look to that as your best quarterback performance over the last 2 decades, it paints the picture of where you're at and the struggles that your franchise have been through. They need something. They need something to build around. And I ultimately, and I'm going to keep saying this offseason, you have an amazing opportunity to take a quarterback and hire a brand new head coach who's an offensive-minded head coach. If there is that buy-in, we're kind of talking in a vacuum here. But if Clint Kubiak likes Mendoza, you get to start and build a foundation in year 1. And then year 2, you can hit the ground running. You're not in the lame duck situation like a lot of times we've seen recently with first overall pick quarterbacks. I think that this is a dream scenario to be able to take your guy, to build around him instead of having to wait until 2027, take a guy in 2027, and then it's year 3 under Kubiak that hopefully you're then ready to compete.
Well, I admittedly do want to see Fernando Mendoza, the personality in Las Vegas. What a hilarious just kind of differentiation between what you would expect a Raiders quarterback to be and what Fernando Mendoza. I don't mean that as a negative at all. Fernando Mendoza is a very just kind of wholesome guy, like a wholesome personality, which is like super interesting.
Maybe that means he'll work then.
Maybe. Not disparaging at all. Not disparaging at all. It's a possibility. It's a possibility that he ends up being a very good starting quarterback for the Raiders. Joe, my philosophy is if you don't have a quarterback, you keep swinging until you find one, right? This team, if I'm sitting there at 1, I would take Fernando Mendoza. As somebody asked me the other day, it was like, would you just fundamentally be okay with Fernando Mendoza at number 1? And my answer is yes, I would fundamentally be okay because he's a quarterback and he's a guy that has showed a lot of progress over the last couple years from his time at Cal to his 1 year at Indiana and showed a lot of positive signs, and he has requisite skill set where I say that guy could be a good starting quarterback in the NFL. And until you have a good starting quarterback in the NFL, you need to keep trying to find one, right? So the Raiders should, as long as they are bought into Fernando Mendoza, they should stick there at 1. And because at the end of the day, people are going to offer you that stuff for that pick. Like, it's going to be out there, no doubt about it, because he's the only quarterback in a draft that has a lot of quarterback needy teams. So there is going to be demands for Fernando Mendoza for that number 1 overall pick. But the conversation of how many first round picks can supplement having your franchise quarterback for the foreseeable future, that's where the conversation gets a little bit deeper for me. And where if they choose to stick at 1, I would stick at 1 and I would take Fernando Mendoza. So we see that eye to eye. But again, I come back to the ultimate question mark, though, is, and then we don't know it right now, do the Raiders believe in Fernando Mendoza? I tend to think that they probably will. I think that they should, most likely.
Well, it's hard for us to answer that question, though, Ryan. It's hard. Well, it's like that one. That's the one question we're not going to be able to address.
And we're never going to know the answer to that question either, because even when we're in Indianapolis talking to people in the know of some sort in those conversations, we're going to hear varying opinions of and most people are just going to say oh yeah, dude, they like Fernando Mendoza. They're going to keep it super blanketed one way or the other. They're not going to give you too much. They're not going to show their hands until probably a couple weeks before the draft, where it's there's a report that's going to surface from one of the media talking heads that's going to say, hey, the Raiders are going to draft Fernando Mendoza with the number 1 overall draft pick, and then the conversation is going to be void at that point. But in February, we need to have this conversation, because that is the tipping point that is going to decide how much they like. Yes, you are correct. We're never going to know that answer. And ultimately, I would be okay with taking Mendoza number 1. But my point overall, though, is that if you're going to take a quarterback at 1, if you're going to take any player at 1, and there's trade offers on the table, you need to have conviction in that pick, ultimately, right? Because it'll be very easy for a Raiders team that has so many holes to say, you know what? We're going to balk. We're going to move back. We're going to get an insane amount of draft capital, and we're going to figure this thing out in a better situation. It's hard to move off of that sometimes. But if they have conviction in them, stay at number 1 and take your guy, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a quarterback, you have no future.